Hi, Mandatory Fun Day, and this is Check Your Six Pack, a veteran podcast done in conjunction with the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress and Uniformed Services University. This is our final episode of season 1. They haven't told me who the guest is. I don't know who the guest is. I'm excited to show him, but I don't know at this point who it is. The views expressed here are those of our hosts and guest speakers and do not represent the Uniformed Services University, the Department of War, or the Henry M. Jackson Foundation for the Advancement of Military Medicine, Incorporated.
So obviously, you've heard my story, and I'm excited to hear yours. And my story, or at least we started kind of in childhood, which in my opinion, I think all of our stories, literally do start there. Yeah. But where did really alcohol start, for lack of a better term, affecting you in your life?
Sure, yeah. My dad drank a lot growing up. My dad's been to rehab, and he does not drink anymore. But he was my example, and he was never an angry drunk. He was always just kind of funny and goofy. But he did, he showcased an unhealthy relationship with alcohol when I was a kid. I've kind of worked through some of that. I really just don't feel like it ever necessarily took away from my childhood. People, when he was going through his process of recovery, people would tell me, hey, you can talk to your dad about this stuff. You can ask for an apology or whatever. And I never felt like I really needed that. But, I did have an example that was not the best, as far as, how you're supposed to consume or have a relationship with alcohol. And so I didn't drink at all until I had already joined the military.
Yeah, similar to me.
Yeah. And so I want to say I was 19 or 20 when I had my first, and it's actually kind of a funny story. My now ex-wife, she was like, yeah, we should drink. You've never had any before. And so she recommended wine spritzers. And so the first time I drank, it was on wine spritzers with Sprite and box wine. And I got
nothing but the best for you, huh?
Yeah, nothing but that. I think the entire
hoity-toity.
The box, this entire bladder of 4 liters of box wine was like $7 back then, and so I got absolutely tanked. And I have never felt as bad as I did the next morning after drinking a massive bladder of box wine. There's nothing really worse than that.
Funny, same or similar story. The first time I drank hard alcohol. That's, I told you that story. And then I started dating this girl, and I'd literally never had wine before. Mm-hmm. And so she's like, let's get a bottle of wine, which actually cost $7 at 7-Eleven. I remember it very clearly. So obviously it was really high quality. And and I drank almost the whole bottle because I was like, oh, it's wine. Like, that's not strong. Absolutely out of my mind, hammered. And then the next day I wanted to chop my own head off. I was I had such a bad headache. So I totally get that. So one thing about kind of your father, when I was on when I was in your shoes as a guest, we talked about your dad being more of a goofy drunk, for lack of a better term. But have you ever thought of how unpredictable that was, and kind of how that set you up in your childhood for, kind of, it wasn't stable. Does that make sense? Yeah. Have you ever thought of how much, let me take this another way. Have you ever heard of, I think it's called Al-Anon?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so when I heard of what Al-Anon was, I've never been to Al-Anon, mm-hmm. but when I heard what it was, I was like, oh my God, I should have went to Al-Anon probably decades ago. And my point that I'm making is, when you hear people talk about Al-Anon, they're people, many of them didn't drink. Yeah. And yet the side effects of someone else drinking in, their home environment created almost the same pattern as if they had drunk.
Sure.
And so that was kind of surprising to see. So, Al-Anon, for those that don't know, is really not for direct alcoholics, although I think you can actually be an alcoholic and be an Al-Anon as well. Yeah. But it's also for people that either lived with or grew up with or loved and are worried about someone that's an alcoholic. And I definitely think it would have helped me years and years of years ago to go to that and understand a lot of the collateral damage that comes from growing up with, living with, or really caring about someone who's struggling with alcohol. Do you think that contributed to kind of your, we're talking about chaos and all these different things. Like, was it that unpredictable? And have you ever thought about, even though he wasn't a bad drunk, but it still created a lot of unknown and probably a lot of anxiety for you as a kid?
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure that I would say I relate to the idea that my childhood was chaotic. It was for sure in certain ways, but it just, I don't know. I don't have the same, I don't have that same story of chaos as a lot of people do, and I mean, throughout my childhood, I've always listened to my parents. I don't know. It's funny because I have such a problem with authority now. Like, if somebody is in a position of authority, I'm like immediately skeptical. But it wasn't that way as a kid. I do think that part of what contributed to my willingness to drink when I did was the fact that I saw my dad accomplish so much even while he was drinking. You know what I mean? He's always been a huge high achiever. He was a commercial airline pilot, a flight instructor, and he owned his own business for a long time. Now he's selling houses. He's always, whatever he's doing, he does it like 110%, and he becomes the best at it. And so I think part of me was like, oh yeah, my dad accomplished all of this while he was drinking, and then also I thought to myself, like, yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna get like that bad, I can drink like whatever, normal, whatever that is. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's funny, when I was no longer after the charge of my parents, I succumbed to the, a little bit of peer pressure. And my now ex-wife was drinking that night too. But yeah, we both woke up the next day, and it was like, we were crippled. And it's so funny because I had been in the Army for long enough to like start to see the culture, like specifically around fitness, like the running culture. And so like we looked up like hangover cures the next day, and the first one, it said go on a run, and we were both like absolutely not, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like the middle of Texas summer. I was like, yeah, maybe if I wanted to die.
Yeah, which will cure a hangover. Death will cure a hangover. I don't care what they say. Do you think that because your dad wasn't, or I should say was able to accomplish so much, and it didn't really affect him to such a negative degree, in your opinion, do you think that made you less afraid of alcohol, to use a term?
Yeah, for sure, because I never saw anything catastrophic happen from the drinking. I never, like, my dad always got his job done. He was always not only a functional member of society, but a high functioning member of society. And then, yeah, he would get kind of funny when he was drunk, there were times when he drank like a lot, but yeah, I never had I never saw any like violence. I never saw anything that really made me afraid, I'd say. And so for sure, I didn't personally have that as a barrier. I didn't have like fear necessarily as a barrier.
So on that note, because of what you just said, why do you think you stayed away from alcohol until you were in the military?
Yeah, I have thought about that at length, and I believe that it is some of the culture in the military, because drinking is just so, it's just so prevalent. Like, it
is 100%. It's ingrained in the culture of the military. We could act like it isn't,
right?
But it is,
And just because somebody gives like a safety brief or says like, don't do that, like don't drink too much, have a plan. It's not the same as actively discouraging it, Like, we've got a store on military installations that is dedicated to the sale of alcohol.
I never thought about that, but that's a good point.
Yeah,
it's a good point.
And I don't think that there's anything wrong with drinking. I don't even necessarily think there's anything wrong with drinking a lot one night, But yeah, we do have this culture that I believe pushes people towards it. And so if you're young and impressionable, if you're a literal teenager, I think even if you have resolve, or even if you have things that would prevent you from drinking, I think it's just really easy to fall into it.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just going to say this right now because it's kind of a hot button in my mind. Like, you know, I think the drinking culture in the military is kind of excessive to a degree, at least when I was dealing with it. And there was a lot of peer pressure and it was excessive. But the other irony too of in the military is like, I think it's kind of insane that you can join the military at 18, you can carry a machine gun and go die, but you can't drink. You know, like that's crazy to me, you know? And that's an interesting contradiction that I've always seen in the military that I just don't necessarily agree with. And I'm not saying I think we should, you know, drink younger, because you definitely need to have a level of maturity and responsibility. But at the same time, if you can carry a machine gun and die for the military, it's like, you know, it's an interesting contrast. But
it's really interesting.
Yeah, when you really think about it, it's like, that's probably not a good idea. And so I never thought of the fact that it's sold on military bases, and you know, I didn't even think of that. And it comes down to when you started drinking in the military, what was the point that you kind of went, this is not good?
Right. Yeah. For sure. There was a period of time where I would get home on lunch, like in the middle of the duty day. I'm still in uniform, and I would have like a beer or two before I went back to work. And it was never more than 2, right? Which doesn't make it any better. But then I was like drinking coffee or chewing gum or whatever to try and hide the smell. And then I also, like, when I drink, I smell like it's like my whole body smells like booze. You know what I mean? And so I'd be like spraying myself with Axe body spray and stuff like that to just try and hide it. But I realized, like, that's for sure the first period of time where I was like, I mean, I definitely recognized, like, I think this might be becoming problematic. But I am so much of a contrarian. I had people in my life at the time that were telling me, like, hey, I don't think you're moving in a good direction. And I was basically just like, F off. You know what I mean? Like, I'll make the decisions I want to make. I was super fit. I felt like I was justifying it in a lot of different ways. You know, I'm doing fine in my career. I'm not in any trouble. I'm getting all my work done. I'm super fit. Like, I can drink when I want to drink.
I did the exact same thing, probably specifically when I think I told you when you interviewed me that when I was on the show, that first 3 seasons was excessive. Yeah. The work was excessive. The stress was excessive. I was making a lot of money. And I mean, I had a cool job and all this. And like, so when people are like, hey man, do you need to slow down? Which was really my girlfriend at the time. You know, I was like, yeah, you don't understand what it's like. You know, I'm working so hard, you know, and all that. And you justify it. And in hindsight, she was right, you know. But based on what you're saying, why do you now not wait? Well, actually, screw it. Let's ask both. Why did you then think you were drinking, going home and having 2 beers or whatever at lunch? And what do you think the reason is now, looking back?
Yeah. I mean, well, now I know. Back then I was in a personally stressful situation for a myriad of, I mean, there's the stress of, the military, there's the stress of, I've got kids, relationship, like all of these things. And I think that instead of developing like healthy coping mechanisms, I think I was using that, because like when I would drink like in the middle of a duty day, it was never crazy. I was a binge drinker. Like Friday, Saturday night, I would just be like absolutely blitzed. I'd do it like one night and then I'd feel bad, and the next morning I wake up and I'd be like, I'm never drinking again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As I think we've all said.
We've all said it.
Right before drinking again.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then there also a huge wake-up call came for me when one night I got behind the wheel after drinking, and I haven't even drank that much that night. But I got home, made it home safe, everything was fine. I woke up the next morning totally sober, and I was like, oh, dude, I should not have been driving. And so now I do not drive if I've had any amount of alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, I have, you know, thank God I didn't hurt anybody.
I have a very similar story, and very similar story. I'll tell it real quick because it was a huge wake up call for me, and it was when I think I had just gotten out of the hospital for my arm. I mean, it was within 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And at that time, by the way, if you looked at my arm within that period, I mean, if somebody met me, they would immediately go look at my arm. It was pink. It looked ridiculous, right? You couldn't ignore it. And the short version is I went out with this girl, and I met her actually in Raleigh. Oh my God, we're here. But I met her in Raleigh, and this is actually I'm going to tell this because this is a funny part of the story. So I meet her online, right? Or I met her online. I meet her in person, and we start drinking, and we get drunk pretty quickly. And I told her, you know, that I think I told her I was in college, you know, going to school for, I don't remember what I told her, you know, and tell her I was in the military, blah, blah. And I think I told her I was in language school. I can't remember. And so we meet up, and then next thing we know, we end up going to a bar, and then like her girlfriends are there and her ex-boyfriend's there. And I'm like, whoa, and she's like, oh my God, I had no idea they're going to be there. I'm like, oh, this is odd. This is a setup, right? Anyways, point goes, she starts getting hammered seeing her ex. I'm like, dude, this is crazy.
Yeah.
I end up getting hammered. So then finally she starts, you know, calling me out on they were lies. It's true. And then finally I had just had enough of her yelling at me. I just met her.
Yeah.
And finally I'm like, you know what? I am lying, you know, and here's the truth. I do this. And there was like silence for like 2 seconds. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, take that. And then she was like, oh, now you're pretending that, you know, you're another lie. And I'm like, oh my God. So I was just like, I had it. And I was planning on staying the night. And I just was just kind of in that automatic mode. And I got in my truck at the time, and I tried to drive way too drunk from Raleigh to Fayetteville. And I ended up being stopped at a green light, passed out. Yeah. And a cop pulled up behind me. And the reason I'm telling this story is because he came up to the window, and he just was like, I think he rolled it down, and I literally was like, I am drunk and I shouldn't be driving. That was just I was just like, I knew, you know what I mean?
Right.
And dude, that cop, whoever he is, you know, kudos to the guy, because, and I felt bad for this, but he looked at my arm, and he was like, I gave him my ID, and he looked at my arm, and he goes, when did that happen? And, you know, I told him I got out of the hospital. And he goes, do you have anyone that could pick you up? And I was like, no, they're all deployed, which was true. And he freaking drove me to a gas station and let me sleep off and sleep in my truck. He's like, you can't drive it, blah, blah. And I was like, no, but I slept in my truck. He didn't, you know, report me. I would have got in a ton of trouble. And the point that I'm making is that was a huge mistake on my part. It was very stupid, but I learned my lesson. And I can honestly say I've never, I mean, I don't really drink much now, but I've never driven, you know, if I've ever had, you know, more than probably two drinks in my life. And so I you know, I can't stress enough, you know, both of us saying how important it is for no matter what level you're drinking at, you know, you really need to never take it to driving, because it's just no good comes from it. And I, like you, am so glad that no one got hurt and it didn't go down like that.
Right. Yeah. It's just not like, I don't know. It's not worth it. Like, you have to sleep in your car if you have to do whatever you need to do. But yeah, do not get behind the wheel of a vehicle. Because I woke up the next morning. I thought I was fine the night before, you know, and at this point, I had been drinking for a couple years at this point. And so, you know, what I've learned since then is I had developed like a level of tolerance. And so it was harder to gauge for me how drunk I was, because being drunk at that point felt like more normal. And also, if I wasn't like absolutely blitzed out of my mind,
you're like, I'm fine.
I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I haven't even drank that much tonight. No, the narrator said he had drank that much that night. And so, I woke up the next morning and I was like, dude, I mean, that was a huge wake up call for me.
Yeah. Like, just like mine was for me. It was definitely, Although I didn't really take it that alcohol was bad, I took it that I shouldn't be driving when I drink. I was like, oh, the drinking was fine. The problem was getting behind the wheel, which, yeah, no, that's so critical. So what I wanted to say on that, you mentioned it, we didn't talk about it when you interviewed me at all, but I think it's worth mentioning. The word you used on why you were drinking at the time was stress.
Mm-hmm.
And, the story I just told you about working on the show, stress, or maybe I did say it, stress. I don't think people really realize how much stress is the catalyst for these. To me, it's the catalyst that leads to the downhill the downward spiral.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And on that note, you have to be aware of the stress when it's piling up, because if you don't see it piling up and start mitigating it in healthy ways, you're going to mitigate it in unhealthy ways. And for me, I know now when stress starts piling up, I have to be extra vigilant, because if I'm not, I'll slip into an unhealthy way of dealing with it.
For sure. Yeah. It was. Also, you get thrown into a culture, you're immediately separated from any support system that you would have had. I had a really great support system growing up. Thankfully, I had a great family. We have our dysfunctional elements like everybody does, but overall, I grew up in a pretty good home. So you're immediately separated from that. You're put somewhere that you probably have never been. You don't know anybody. Like, all of the people that should be helping you, I mean, a lot of them are really young too. Like, your first line is probably just a couple of years older than you.
Yeah.
Your company commander, probably mid-20s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, your first sergeant is probably a little bit older, but I mean, it almost feels like the blind leading the blind when it comes to life problems.
100%. It's just like when you're getting out of the, well, you haven't done this yet, but when you're getting out of the military and I'm going through like the ACAP process,
mm-hmm.
and like these guys are like, okay, so you're going to learn to write your resume, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, cool. So like, when did you get out? Oh, I'm still in. Why the hell am I listening to you? What do you know? I'm like, why don't you guys hire some people that are out of the military?
Right.
It's the blind leading the blind, which the military seems to do a lot. But it's such a important thing to recognize, which is, it really, in your jump from first line to like first sergeant in your example, it's got to be a pretty big deal
for
to
sure.
get to that, that level.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, and that's not to say people aren't trying to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
Best.
Yeah.
When I was a sergeant E5, staff sergeant E6, I was doing my best with the life experience and tools I was equipped with. But at the end of the day, I was a freaking 24, 25, 26-year-old dude. You know?
Yeah.
And I'm still not that old. But what I know now at 32, I wish I had known back then, because I just would have been a way better leader.
100%. And it's one of those things too, where, like you said, you're always doing the best that you knew at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a constant evolution of improvement. But it's like, again, we talked about earlier, which is, it's easy in hindsight to look back and be like, okay, like this was this meant this, I should have done this, whatever. But when you're in it, you can't see the forest for the trees. It's like you're just in it. You're in the middle of it. And it really takes getting some distance from it to give you the ability to have that hindsight. So we talked about stress and day drinking when you were going home at lunch. When did it, what was the next progression?
The next progression for sure was, I was just like binge drink. Anytime I drank, it was just, I was drinking until I had no idea where I was. And I did it in San Antonio one time on a TDY. I was like just blitzed, quite literally running the streets of San Antonio. I ran across a highway.
Yeah. I've been similar story. And so was that when you were kind of like, all right, dude, this has gotten worse. This is progressing. Okay. So at what point did you kind of go, like, I need to address this?
It's so funny.
And actually, I also want to ask, how long did it take to get to that point? Because I think it's important for people to understand that it is progressive, and it
Yeah.
may take 6 years, you know what I mean, to get to that point, but it will get to that point if left unchecked.
Yeah, probably 6-7 years of like slowly getting worse, and until it got to the point where I was just like, it was happening. I was getting blackout drunk, binge drinking so frequently.
How frequently would you say
Like, I mean, at least
at this time?
probably twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week.
Which is pretty crazy for also being on active duty.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insane. Most of the time, it would be like one day a week, right? Friday or Saturday night.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were a couple times when it was more, and especially like if I was on leave or something. Because like something I always was pretty good about doing was not drinking the night before I had to work. I think I just genuinely did not want to go on like a 5-mile run like hungover.
That's fair.
But yeah, like, God, it was just. I mean, it was so. And I have more stories that are embarrassing rather than traumatic. So like one of them was I was blackout drunk one night. My then wife was telling me, like, she could tell I was about to puke, and so she was like, I have a bowl right here, and I like looked at her. I said something really mean. I said something like, shut up, you stupid idiot, or something like that, and then I puked in the clean clothes hamper, and so all over her work clothes.
Nice.
And so she still teases me about that to this day. But yeah, I mean, and it was just, what I often tell people is, you know, I don't really feel like I had a rock bottom, but I'd say 90% of the most embarrassing moments of my life all had to do with alcohol. And I was a jerk. You know, there were times when I was a complete dick because I was drinking, or because somebody told me like, hey, it's probably time for you to like take a look at this, and I was just like, whatever, screw you. You know what I mean? It was just, I had a lot of shame associated with my drinking, and you know, I'm not exactly sure what that is tied to. I definitely felt when I was younger that I hadn't achieved enough, and so maybe it came from that as well. You know, I think that there are a lot of different factors in there, but I had so much shame, I just was not willing to say that I was doing anything wrong. You know, like and especially after I was, you know, then legally old enough to drink, I was like, whatever, I can do this. Like, you know, I'm allowed to do this. There's nothing wrong with it. I couldn't take accountability. I couldn't admit fault. And when I did things that hurt people, it was a them problem. Like, you're soft, whatever. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal. I didn't break anything. I didn't hit anybody. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it ended up.
You know, you said multiple times that you didn't have a rock bottom. You know, and the one thing that I feel is that everyone has a rock bottom, because everyone has a bottom of their journey, right? So there's always a bottom. Everyone's got a bottom. I think the perspective is like your bottom. You're like, well, it wasn't rock bottom because you're looking at other people's rock bottom, and you're like, that's not that bad.
There's some comparison
right?
happening.
Yeah, but at the same time, you did have a rock bottom for you, right? And the way I personally characterize rock bottom is, what was the point at before it started continuously getting better?
Right.
You know what I mean? Because that's to me your rock bottom.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that I could definitively say that there was like this catalyst moment that changed it all for me, but you know, at some point I did realize like, oh, you know, this is not normal. And a big thing for me was after I had stopped drinking, like I was, especially probably about 6 months into when I had completely stopped drinking, I just felt so much better. I viewed myself much more positively. I viewed like just everything kind of shifted. My whole, because I think that, you know, when people have problematic behavior with any substance, you know, or even things that people can develop problematic behavior with that are not substances, we all have similar qualities. I think in some way, I don't want to use the term narcissistic because I think it gets thrown around way too much, but I think that there are some tendencies that are in line with that term that like a lot of us develop. There's selfishness, there's an inability to take accountability, there's like shame or something that we're hiding from. You know, there doesn't matter who you talk to or what they were struggling with. like we all have like the story might not be the same, but the theme is the same.
So I'll tell you what I have described it as, and see if that makes sense with you. The way I describe it is, if you grow up with a lack of self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
there's shame associated with that lack of self-worth, right?
Yeah.
I'm not good enough is like the core mantra, right? And then once you have that, there's also associated with that is, why don't you have self-worth?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're bad. You see yourself as bad. So what that leads to is an inability, because you fundamentally think that you're bad, there's an inability for you to separate bad actions from who you fundamentally are.
Right.
So you do something bad and people go, dude, that was bad. And instead of going, man, that was bad behavior, you go, I'm not bad. They weren't saying you're bad. They said what you did was bad. But we take it as I'm bad, because we know intrinsically we're not bad people, but we are doing bad things.
Right.
But we have to try and defend our innate nature because we don't understand the difference between who we fundamentally are and what we do.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I felt like I had to defend myself, and then there would be the classic thing. If somebody brought it up, I'd be like, "Well, I'm doing this well, and I'm doing that well.
Yeah.
I haven't done this. I haven't,
Yep.
And it's so funny because like all of those things were true. There were plenty of things that I had a reason to be proud of. What's funny is I never thought about them other than when I was trying to defend myself, because of that low self-worth.
Yeah.
They only came to the forefront of my mind when I was like trying to.
You would never give yourself credit until you're using them for defense.
Yes.
Then you're like, whoa, I do this. And
Exactly.
before that, you're like, I don't do anything well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for sure from that low self-worth, but it was, I don't know, it was just crazy. And what's funny now is I am very much a person where if somebody comes to me and they say, hey, you did something that hurt me, or you didn't do this thing well, I need you to do this better. I am very much the person that, even if I don't feel I was entirely in the wrong, I'll still apologize and I'll still try and make it right. And so I've completely flipped that.
Yeah.
And that feels really good. And I've found that has been incredible in both my interpersonal relationships
100%.
and professional relationships.
100%. Yeah. The term that I've heard, there's two of them. I forget one of them, but one of them is DEAR. Defend, explain, excuse, rationalize. So it's like somebody says, hey, you hurt my feelings. And I'm like, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
Or I hurt your feelings because X, right? Or
Sure.
rationalize or whatever. And I used to do that. I was Mr. Deer, right?
Yeah.
And just like you said, I finally, and I forget what the moment was that was like the aha moment. I think it was with my fiance, where I accepted that just because I didn't intend to hurt her feelings didn't mean that I didn't hurt her feelings, right? And then once I just kind of accepted that and was like, oh man, and I forget what the acronym is for taking responsibility. But that little switch, like you said, it's not that big of a switch if you really think about it, but it has made every relationship, in my life so much better, because it's like my intent didn't change either way, but the way I handled it did change. And that change made all the difference in the world,
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting now, because now I don't really have shame tied to much. I make like ridiculous videos that I put on the internet where I say like off the wall things. I mispronounce words all the time. Sometimes the information's not 100% accurate because it is just me doing the research on this stuff, and I'm talking about complex topics.
Yeah.
But yeah, now that I have worked through it, that I very rarely feel shame anymore, and I don't even now feel shame for the things in the past. I have done my absolute best to make amends with the people that I needed to make amends with, but now I talk about it, and I talk about it very openly. I'm a hyper transparent person, and it's just what I did at one point. It's not even, I don't even refer to it, and this is a personal thing for me because everybody is able to walk this however they want to walk it, but I don't even refer to it as who I was. I refer to it as what I did. It was just It was the things that I did at that time.
I mean, what you just said is literally what I said a minute ago, which is the difference between who you are innately and your actions.
Right.
You know, and you know, we talked about shame when you interviewed me, which was, as you just said, once I had processed, you know, again, I won't rehash our interview, but once I had processed that, and then that solved the shame component, that was a night and day difference in my, not just my, you know, battle with alcohol or addiction. It was my entire life.
Yeah.
It changed my entire life like that. And I'm not saying it solved everything, by no means.
Yeah.
But it was a radical change, positive change, a major positive change, and put me on a completely different trajectory, for lack of a better term.
Right. Yeah. And I think that like, I mean, if I had, you know, anything that I wanted to pass on to people that are also in the scenario is separating. And sometimes this is hard to do because we have people in our lives that are not, you know, helping. And it is the personal responsibility of the person going through it to deal with it. But, you know, we can also recognize there's some external factors at play. But just separating, like, you're not a bad person because you're going through something or even because you did something that was bad. It's something that happened. You have to address it, and then you have to address what caused it. And, like, when I was able to do that, now it just feels like I get to live life free. And I get to live life free from even more things. Because, like, you know, I mean, you're a person that has a forward-facing public image. If I allowed the opinions of literally everybody on the internet to impact how I felt about myself, I would not feel good about myself. You know, people, they spread lies, they spread hate, they say terrible things about pretty much anybody that develops any level of notoriety.
Yeah.
And you'll see people they're like commenting on things as if they have knowledge, and you're like, I know that's not true. Like, I know that. I was there at that time. That didn't happen. And so it's funny. It's helped me as a content creator.
Yeah.
Not just in my professional life or with my kids or whatever, but it's also helped me as a content creator because now, like, the opinions of randoms are just like, it just is what it is, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I do a thing now where, you know, it's very simple. If I don't respect you, I don't care about your opinion. You know, if I respect someone, I will care about their opinion because I want feedback.
Sure.
Give me feedback. But if I don't respect someone or if I don't know them, their opinion doesn't. And I mean, everyone can have an opinion, but it doesn't mean it needs to affect me.
Right.
Right. It's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, for sure.
So from what I'm hearing, am I correct in saying there was no definitive aha moment where you're like, oh man, like this is bad? Like it just was a series of recognizing that you had a problem?
Yeah, I mean,
let me ask you a different question. What was the worst thing that happened as a result of your struggle with alcohol?
The worst thing that happened as a result of my struggle with alcohol, I would for sure say it was the times when I was just an absolute dick to my then spouse. You know, but yeah, I never had, like, I didn't crash into a building or anything like that. Like that never happened for me. I came to the realization that, like, a lot of the things that were stressing me out in life were part of what was driving me to drink. And normally, like, a lot of people will tell you, like, try and remove yourself from that stress, but you, like, can't when you're in the military. Like, you're not able to remove yourself from the stress. And so it added an extra layer of challenge. But what I chose to, I don't know, through grit or willpower or whatever it was, I chose to just focus on other things. I started doing jiu-jitsu. I really started focusing even more on my fitness. I went to college. I really started to, like, bury myself in school. I tried to find things to replace it. But it was hard. It was hard, especially initially, because I legitimately thought, like, oh no, I'm not going to be fun anymore. I'm not going to be funny anymore. I'm not going to be able to have fun anymore. And it's just, I don't know, it was crazy. For the first, like, 3 months after I completely gave up drinking, I was like, I don't like this. I don't want to be doing this. But I stuck with it, you know. I want to say it was a counselor, actually, that was like, hey, why don't you just give this a try? Like, this is not working. It's creating a contentious situation in your life. Why don't you just give up drinking for a little while?
So it's funny you say that, because when I was in Warriors Heart in the rehab facility, at a certain point, and I said this when you interviewed me about how I was like, well, obviously I'm here as the result of my choices.
Mm-hmm.
But one other thing I didn't mention then was, another part of it was me going, okay, I had been so self-destructive at that point. And I mean, really self-destructive. And I, by the way, justified self-destruction at the time as a mechanism for growth.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally went, I've been down the path of self-destruction so far. The only further way to take it is death.
Yeah.
Like, that's how far I took it. So then I went, what have I not tried at this point? That got me here in rehab. What have I not tried? And then it was like this weird realization that I just was like, I've never tried self-improvement. Never even thought about it, right?
Yeah.
And so I was just like, man, I will try and actually treat myself well and do nice things for myself. And it was literally something I just hadn't tried. And the only way you're going to get different results, as we know, is you got to do something different. Because if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results over and over again.
Yeah, God. And yeah, I mean, well, and it's funny because guys in our situation, some of us choose to continue to do the same thing over and over again for 7, 8, a decade, multiple decades.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is insane, because at no point did I ever drink a bunch and like I was like really proud of myself the next day.
Yeah. Like, oh, that was awesome.
It's like super counterintuitive.
It is.
Because you would think, like, I don't know, like if I walked into a room every day, sat in the same chair, and somebody like smacked me in the back of the head,
you wouldn't go in the
3
chair
or 4
anymore.
times of that, and I'd be like, oh crap, I can't sit in that chair. But like I just kept going back to the bottle.
So in my book, I've had several people read it and like text me or comment or whatever and be like, really, dude? You did the same thing again? Like, I'm on chapter blank and you just kept making this. I'm like, yeah, I know. That's kind of the point. I kept making the same mistake. But so what would you say, I mean, other than obviously your period of abstinence that helped you, which I think in my opinion kind of gives you distance to go, oh, and you brought this up and I think it's worth hitting again. I don't think people that are in a cycle, for lack of a better term, of heavy drinking realize how much it's affecting their health.
Yeah.
I know I didn't. I'm sure you probably didn't until you stop.
Mm-hmm.
And then however much time goes by, and then you just go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, how unhealthy I felt because I was so used to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a critical point.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, because even just you can adapt to that feeling within a couple months, if and then after a couple of years, it's like that's the norm. Like you don't even remember what it was like prior to.
Yeah. The term I always use is it just adjusts your body zero.
Yeah.
That becomes the zero.
Yeah, but that's a really good way to put it. But yeah, I dropped a ton of weight after I stopped drinking, which was, it was awesome. It was easier to run. It was easier to think. What I liked the most though was how I viewed myself differently.
100%.
And like I still struggled with, like, as I do to this day, with like self-worth or
100%.
just allowing myself to feel proud.
Yep.
But I didn't. It became more neutral as opposed to really negative.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So that was for sure the best. And then there were moments when I was able to like allow myself to be proud of, like, I'm a good dad.
Yeah. I'm present.
Yeah. The moments when I was a good spouse, I was like, oh, this is really cool. But yeah, it just abstinence for a period of time worked for me. For sure. It allowed me to distance myself.
Yeah. It gives you perspective.
It gave me a lot of perspective. It showed me, I was just like, this is insane. It's so hard to articulate, but I just felt like I can't believe I was living like that.
Yeah, you're preaching the choir here.
Yeah.
I promise you. Yeah, I've done that multiple times, and just afterwards you go, oh my God, how did that become okay? How did that become my default? And what were the things that really helped you on your journey other than abstinence? Like, what were the things that you were able to utilize, or, was it an organization? What you mentioned, the organization you went to when you interviewed me, a group, I forget, I don't think you mentioned the name of
it's funny, it was literally just a group of guys. I don't even remember. It wasn't, it was like with a local church.
It was called Not AA.
Yeah, basically.
We call ourselves Not AA.
But it was
called Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
I'm Bob Smith.
It was called a former drinking group.
Yeah. Former drinking bros.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't even associated with any official organization. It was just, and that group specifically, if I remember correctly, it wasn't even tied to any one thing.
Substance.
I want to say that there was a guy that was hooked on narcotics.
Yeah.
Just all different things. And so that when I got referred to that group, I was like, this seems kind of odd. I mean, it seems fairly informal. But that's when that guy pulled me to the side and he was like, he said, look for the similarities.
Yeah. That was very good advice.
Yeah. The guy that, nobody ran the group, but the guy that was like the one that was always there and he was very dedicated to like a recovery pathway. He said, don't look for the differences. He said, because you didn't have the time when you were homeless or the time when you lost your job or, anything like that. He said, look for the similarities because we all have similar themes in our story.
So here's what I'll say to that, because I think that's very interesting. Because if you think about it, when you interviewed me, I said the same exact thing, but in reference to something else.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't think we were recording when I said it, but I think there's a massive problem in the veteran community of comparison.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And, I get it all the time when people go, I mean, you did it. Like, a lot of people do. And don't get me wrong, I know it comes from a good place.
Yeah.
Which is, I was in the Army. I didn't do what you did, or some version of that. And like, I was telling you, I have a buddy that's done so much, I could never compare myself to him. He's done infinitely more than me. And he's been here in the military for 28 years now.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I get it because I don't want people to think that I associate at his level. But at the same time, what I've realized is that, you're still active duty, but let's say you were out. Like, were you in? Yeah, you're a veteran. Great, me too. We're the same. And as soon as we start talking about units, time in, deployments, whatever it is, combat, no combat, all we are doing is finding differences rather than connecting on our massive similarities.
Right.
And so I think, and again, where do I think that comparison comes from? I think it comes from what I claim is the disease, which is a lack of self-worth, fundamentally. Sure. So everyone's like, oh, dude, everyone is so quick in the military or veterans to build up the other person. I mean nothing, but this guy, guy's the man, right? That's a common thing. Yeah. And I think in general, it just comes down to, we need to focus on the massive similarities that we have and not the small, relatively insignificant details. And it's like that with veterans, military, or people dealing with alcoholism or addiction. I think it's the same ultimate thing. Yeah,
for sure. It turns nasty, and it's like, I was probably 5 or 6 years into my career. I was a Sergeant E5 at the time, and I called my branch manager, and I was like, hey, I haven't deployed yet. Like, I'm an E5 now. Do you have anything for me? He literally told me no, which I know now was a lie for sure, because like my MOS, I was a 35 Fox all source intel analyst. Like, I'm not that MOS anymore, but we were in every unit at the battalion level or higher. Like, come on, dude, you've got a unit that is deploying somewhere.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to put me in. But that started me on this pathway of like, I volunteered for the 160th. They've never had a slot open up. I volunteered for Ranger Regiment. I blew out my shoulder and I had to have surgery. I tried to find a Y-ass task to get it. I tried everything. It was not for a lack of trying. And so I got to my follow-on unit, And I was talking to my commander, and I was like expressing all this frustration, and he was like, dude, he's like, I've got like 7 deployments. He's like, but here's the thing. He said, we need people present in the military, whether you're doing the thing or not doing it. Like, the military has to exist. He said, so like, if that's the role that you have, he said, you just have to do that to the best of your ability. That's all you can do.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, you look at, combat in general. I mean, I knew some dudes that were absolute studs. When I was in Ranger Battalion, one guy in particular that I'm thinking of, he got out, if I'm not mistaken, he got out in either July or August of 2001. ETS got out. He was I learned so much about, sniping from him. He was an animal. And man, you want to talk about, he got out, and it really messed him up that he got out right before, the war started.
Yeah.
And one day I finally told him, I'm like, dude, like, deploying or not deploying doesn't make you better or worse. It doesn't make you more of a person or a man or less. You don't control that. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And myself, like, I got hurt. I got hurt and I got medically retired. I didn't do nearly as much in special operations or my old unit that I wanted to, because I got hurt and I got out. I wish I would have been able to do another 10 years and do all these things. I had a list of all these things I wanted to do, and I didn't get to do them. And I was mad for a while that this happened and I couldn't do it. And then I finally had to come to terms and go, it wasn't my fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that I'm more or less. I had no control over it. It happened, and I just have to let go of what I think I could have been or could have done, because it didn't happen. We control the effort. We don't control the results. And once you come to terms and accept yourself internally, then you lose really the need to get that acceptance externally from the trophies, deployment trophies or this or that or awards or whatever. They don't matter. They don't matter. And like me, my awards literally are I actually don't know where they are. Maybe they're in a box in storage, maybe in the garage. I honestly, if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you. And people are like, well, that's weird. If I had that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, I think if you did have that award, Purple Heart, as an example, like, if you did have that award, I don't think you'd care about it as much as you'd think you would. You know what I mean? I remember getting in the hospital and getting it and being like, that's for and it just felt so trite.
Right.
I was just like, it felt kind of icky, if that makes sense. And so where I'm going with that is, like, none of those things, none of the things you wear on your head, your chest, your shoulders, have anything to do with who you really are.
Right. Yeah.
So one of the things you mentioned was, you trying to jump on different units that were deploying, all those different things, and just, it didn't work out for whatever reason. But, kind of folding our tendency to compare, do you feel like maybe your drinking got worse because of that comparison, or because those you weren't able to be successful in jumping on those things?
Yeah, in the military community in general, I think it's even exacerbated further in the Army because of how, like, I think it's a good thing that we wear badges and tabs, because you can physically see if somebody has a specific skill set that has obvious value in it. If I wanted to know how to do an air assault, I would go find somebody with an air assault badge. You know what I mean? So that's cool. But I do think that it creates an environment where there is comparison, and a comparison to an unhealthy level. Sometimes people have comparison that they do internally. I found myself doing it. Earlier in my military career, I'd be like, oh yeah, he's got, a badge, but I bet I can run faster, whatever it was, whatever, toxic mentality I had. I definitely think that the shame from that, not deploying, definitely, among other things, contributed to it for sure. Because, it truly was not for a lack of effort. I really did try. And now I'm on the tail end of my career. I'm probably going to get out having never done that. And so I had to come to terms with that. I had to come to terms with accepting, like, I did what I could. I did what I could in the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
And I did it to the best of my ability. And so, I had to reconcile that, because we've had this group of people that for like literally 20 years, after 9/11, everybody deployed like basically on a schedule. You'd deploy, you'd come back, you'd train, build up to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very interesting being part of kind of that first wave of people where that wasn't necessarily the case. Now you have a lot of leaders, even at the battalion and higher levels, that haven't deployed. And like, that's what we're going to have. We cannot literally be at war all the time. Ideally we would, not be at war, but that's also, you're going to have leaders, and just the majority of your force is not going to have that experience. And so I literally didn't start making content because of it. Like, I wanted to start doing like social media content probably 2 or 3 years sooner than I actually did, but I didn't think that my opinion on really anything would be valid because I didn't have that experience, which is so funny because, don't get me wrong, I have a lot of respect for the guys that did it. The guys that deployed, the guys that saw combat. I'm not taking anything away from them at all. But that experience wouldn't like validate the comedy that I do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The jokes
100%,
that I make about like military culture and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Those two things aren't really
the same. They're separate.
They're separate. Yeah. They're not connected. And I get my fair share of people taking pot shots at me. They call me slick sleeve or whatever, and I'm just like, whatever.
Slick what?
Slick sleeve, because I don't have a deployment patch. But yeah, and it's just funny. It's funny that I allowed the shame of that, to stop me from doing what I'm doing now. And I've achieved a decent level of success. But I allowed shame and other people's opinions and stuff like that to prevent me from taking that step.
So I'm gonna throw out something to that.
Uh-huh.
That's not what prevented you.
What prevented me?
Your opinion of yourself.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I have just...
What they said mirrored what you were saying to yourself.
Right.
And that's why it stung. And that's why you listened to it.
Yeah, it validated probably what I was saying to myself, or it put truth behind it. Yeah. And
the truth was yours. They were just echoing what you already felt about yourself.
Right.
So you kept yourself from putting that content out there because you didn't feel like you were enough.
Yeah. And I think about it now, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? I'm a purple belt now. And so a lot of times in academies or dojos, whatever people have them called, gyms, you'll have your senior instructors, and people will go to them for advice on any number of things. But like, the fact that you have a jiu-jitsu black belt, like, you're an expert in jiu-jitsu, obviously, but that doesn't necessarily mean you should be giving financial advice. Now, if you also happen to be a financial planner, great, and anybody can take advice from anybody they want, but I kind of view it the same as that combat experience. I would never, ever try and tell somebody how to behave in a tactical situation, because I've never done it.
Well, so I'll say this because I think it goes along with your point. In tactical world, I've taught quite a bit of CQB, post-military.
Sure.
And I taught some in the military, but I taught quite a bit out of the military. And the one thing that I've gotten asked many times, it's like, well, how did you guys do it? Show us how you guys did it. And I was like, you don't understand that even if I showed you, it wouldn't be the right way for you.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be
for that situation.
It wouldn't be the right way for your organization. It wouldn't be the right way for your mission set. It wouldn't be the right way for, blank, blank, blank. It's like all tactics are dependent on the specifics of that situation. Like, everything that's a perfect fit for something is specific to that thing. Right. So it's not like there's a set of tactics that works for everything. Right. And so even if somebody, it's like myself, okay, I can give you a good tactics, example or lesson or understanding from what I did, but it doesn't mean it would be the right answer for someone else necessarily, or for another unit, or for, you know what I mean? So it's like, when I started teaching, and I learned this when I started teaching law enforcement, I had to fully relearn, or not relearn, I had to relearn CQB from their job set, or
Sure.
their how what they needed to do, what they needed to accomplish, and I had to like look through it through their job, and then really kind of relearn it so I could give some opinion. Again, it wasn't from the experience of being a law enforcement officer, but you know, I could look at it in a different way. And so even when you have that experience, it doesn't mean that it applies to everything. You know, it's we all have specific experience. So I mean, speaking of tactics, and we just kind of talked about this earlier, is, you know, the tactics, each tactics for, you know, different mission sets are different, and each person's tactics for, you know, dealing with their struggle with alcohol are different. What were kind of your tactics? What tactics worked for you in your battle, so to use a word, with alcohol?
Yeah, so for me, it's funny, I didn't have necessarily a long-term plan. Like I never intended to or did not intend to reintroduce alcohol into my life. I just knew I had a problem in the moment, and I was like, I gotta stop here. I gotta stop this. And I have an all or nothing personality. If I'm drinking something, whether it's alcohol or anything else, I'm pounding it. And literally anybody knows me can attest to this. You know, when I started doing content, I mean, I am it's the first thing I think about when my eyes open, and it's the last thing I think about when they close in the day. You know, if I find a new hobby, I fully throw myself into it. You know, if I find a subject that I'm, you know, interested in, I'll become an expert on it in 2 weeks. I fully have an all or nothing personality. And so I knew the only way to at least initially tackle this was all or nothing. And it was nothing for me. Abstinence was how I decided to deal with it in that moment. About a year and a half or 2 years later, I decided to kind of reintroduce it. And it's funny because alcohol is the first thing where I was able to just not do it all or nothing. Like now I can have 2 or 3 drinks and cut it off. And I very rarely drink. I have drank more than that, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
And it's only in scenarios where I'm around people I trust. I don't have to drive.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But yeah, like the abstinence route for a period of time and then reintroducing it, I mean, it's worked for me. It's worked really well. And now I'm really glad because I get to talk to people candidly about this because I dealt with that shame. I can help other people. I do want to say, for anybody that wants to go that route or use that method to get control, make sure that you're not thinking like, oh, I'm going to cut it out for a period of time and then reintroduce it back in. The focus needs to be on getting a handle on the problem, you know? And I'm not saying you can't reintroduce alcohol, but I'm saying it shouldn't be like, oh, if I can just go a year, then I can start drinking again.
It shouldn't be a reward.
Yeah. You know, the focus for me fully was, okay, I recognize I have a problem behavior, and I'm going to address the problem behavior. And that's how I decided to do it. And in that period of time, that year and a half, 2 years, whatever it ended up being, I addressed so much. Like I said before, my outlook on myself got better. My outlook on my family got better. And now I get to talk to people about this very candidly because I just don't have shame tied to it. And so when I tell people, like, one time I puked in the clean clothes hamper on my then wife's like work clothes, you know, I can laugh about it, and it's just I don't have to be this terrible person because I drank too much at one point. I can help other people, and that's been really cool. It's also kind of shocking for some people because there is still very much a stigma associated with this kind of stuff, and I think when you say somebody has a drinking problem, people's minds just will immediately go to the worst case scenario. You know, they're a drunk, they're non-functional, they can't hold a job. You know what I mean? Like they just go to the worst possible place. That's not where everybody ends up, and you know, likewise, not everybody has to have the same way of dealing with it. Not everybody has to abstain from alcohol for the rest of their lives. I really think that hamstrings a lot of programs because first off, I don't think it's realistic. Like, we live in a society where alcohol is constantly present.
I mean, I can tell you that the stories from the rehab that I heard, the amount of guys that relapsed at the airport
on the way home from rehab.
It was like, wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's very hard. Look, if it's like a hard drug, that it's harder to get,
Yeah, yeah.
you know, at least. So
There's a barrier to
there's
access.
that, you know, but when it's on every street corner, you know, when it's in every airport you walk through, that makes it a lot more difficult. And so to me, that makes abstinence as the final end state, you know, just infinitely more difficult. And so absolutely, I think that's a critical point. So one thing that I think talking about abstinence that's interesting, you mentioned this, you know, you said, I have an all or nothing mentality, and I was the same way.
Yeah.
And when that's true, that means, you know, abstinence is the nothing. The problem is if you're preaching abstinence and you have one, well, then it goes back to all.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't go back to, oh, I'll just have one or two. It goes, I'll have all the drinks.
Yeah.
Right? What are your feelings on that?
The problem with the complete abstinence mentality and the idea that that is the only way to handle this is, like if you have a period of time where you don't drink and then you have a drink, or even if you completely fall off the wagon and you get just blitzed, that you are a complete failure, you know, that starts the shame cycle over
100%.
again. That can put you right back. It doesn't erase the good that you did, the progress that you made, but it's really easy to get into that mentality. And shame is the biggest thing for me, and I think for most of us,
I agree. Yeah.
that will keep you, down low.
Yeah.
And so I don't like the abstinence forever mentality. If somebody wants to put that on themselves, that's totally, if it's a personal choice, that's totally fine.
Yeah.
But when it's something external,
an organizational choice.
when it's somebody else saying you're not successful, well, then you're literally saying at any point I could be not successful.
Yeah.
You know, when in reality you've had, even if it's a week of not drinking, great, you know, awesome, you did a week. Let's do another one. Now it's a month. Now it's a couple months. Now it's a year. And then maybe at some point after you've separated yourself from this, maybe now we get to reintroduce that back into our lives.
I mean, to what you're saying, I think here's how I view it. I think if you preach abstinence and say, if you ever drink again, you know, you failed, for lack of a better term. To me, that's weakness.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically saying, if this, then this.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, what sounds way stronger is, I started occasionally drinking again, or I can have a drink or I cannot. Doesn't matter either way. I'm fine either way.
Yeah.
That is, to me, that's conquering. You know what I mean? The other one is just waiting to be conquered on a long enough timeline. And I think to me, that's critical. And so I look at, I can have a drink now if I want. I've conquered my alcoholism.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, if I choose to, I can do that and I can be fine, or I can choose not to, and it doesn't matter either way. The point that I'm making is I am no longer controlled by it. It is controlled by me.
Yeah. I definitely remember, you know, when my problematic drinking was just, you know, at its worst, the anxiety that I would have the next day, like wondering, oh God, what did I do? You know, what did I say? What did people think? You know, where did I go? Where was I?
Yeah.
Like I had just this massive amount of anxiety. And then even in those moments where I would just have a few, I'd still have that anxiety. And after I've had it under control, I don't have that anymore, which is really cool. You know, I go out to a dinner and I have 2 or 3 drinks, or I go over to somebody's house. And it's nice too, because when I was not drinking, it kind of sucked when people would ask me, like, "Oh yeah,
you're that guy.
You don't drink?
You're that guy."
And like naturally, somebody, especially in the military community, where none of us have any social awareness at all, like somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, why?"
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so like now I don't have to explain it. Somebody's like, "Hey, you know, do you want something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll take a drink." And then I can have one, and it just, I don't know. I do feel like it adds to my life now.
Yeah. No, I gotcha.
The ability, and
it's something you don't have to worry about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And honestly, I felt an incredible sense of pride, because I realized after a couple months after I reintroduced it back in, I was like, God, I haven't gotten like drunk. I haven't been like tanked. I haven't even been like I haven't even drank enough to the point where I would feel completely uncomfortable driving. Again, I don't drive if I've had any alcohol at this point. But yeah, it was incredible, very freeing. It was a huge point of pride for myself, and part of me, the contrarian in me for sure was kind of like, hey, I told all those people, abstinence people, like it doesn't have to be that.
Look at me now.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, look at me now.
I went my own way.
It definitely, it just feels good. It feels good to have control of this, and it also feels good having had the experience, because so many people in our community, have issues surrounding alcohol. I know that I can help those people too, and that I can speak from experience.
100%.
There is no one size fits all. There's not one way. There's not one way to get it under control, and then there's not one way to control it. And we all have a different story of how we got to the place where we're like, oh, this has got to stop. And then we all have a different story of, where we went after. But yeah, I'm glad that now I can, because I'm at events and stuff all the time where people just hand me drinks, and so I can have it, and it's fine. It's not awkward. There's no shame associated with it.
So, based on what you're saying and what you said earlier, you never had that, again, we used the rock bottom moment, or, you're never, ended up in the hospital, choking on your own vomit or whatever. But like, what attracted to you? What made you want to host this podcast and really, well, I don't know if you knew you were going to put your story out there, but what was it that attracted you to this program that you wanted to help others?
Yeah, the thing that I would not have done it if they had the abstinence or nothing mentality. And so that was the trigger for me.
That makes sense.
Hearing that a bunch of people who can speak from a place of authority on the science behind this stuff, and hearing them say, there's not one way to skin this cat.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different ways we can address this stuff. That was huge for me, because it's something that I've said a lot, having been somebody that dealt with this type of problematic behavior and had it affect my life also indirectly. I just never felt like there was one way. There's not one way to do anything in life. There's no, like, I've learned, and I'm only 32. I'm not super young anymore, not super old, but what I have learned is that there's just no real right way to do life.
No, and also there's very few things that you say that a person could say that couldn't be counter-argued to a degree. There's a counter for everything, right? And it's like, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's true, but blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh my God. That's just the way that there's two sides of everything. There's balance. That's how the universe operates, is balance. And I think what we're really talking about when we're talking about, we're talking about the opposite of abstinence is balance.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that balance is like, that's what and I think what nature, everything is designed for, is a balance between that. And I think when we're in balance, it feels right.
For sure.
Versus when we're not in balance and it almost feels like we're waiting for the scale to balance out.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I know you said there wasn't really a rock bottom moment, but what would you say, in your opinion, what was the thing or the series of things that really kind of caused you to see what you were doing and go, I need to change this?
Yeah. So, probably the biggest driving force was my children, I'd say. There were times when I don't remember ever getting like blackout drunk when I had my kids alone, but I do remember drinking past the point where I probably should have when I was the one in charge of the kids. And I would justify by saying, the kids are asleep, now I can play my video games, drink more than I should. In addition to that, like I said, every single, at least 90% of the embarrassing moments of my life all had to do with alcohol. I puked on the clean clothes. Every embarrassing thing I ever said, every mean thing that I ever said, because I'm normally a really nice guy. alcohol gave me the ability to maybe say the things out of anger that I didn't want to say when I was sober.
Yeah.
And, you know, my ex and I had a tumultuous relationship right from the very beginning. And there were aspects of that relationship that, you know, I think, I don't want to absolve myself of any responsibility, but I think my relationship, stress associated with my relationship was part of it. Part of maybe something that contributed to that problematic behavior. I, you know, even after I got it under control, I still wanted to drink. I was still thinking about it like all the time. And, you know, lots of people in the military go through, you know, divorce. After I was no longer in the relationship, I mean, I realized a couple weeks later, I hadn't even thought about alcohol. Like I truly felt free, you know, and we both contributed to the issues that we had in our marriage.
I mean, yeah, it's like I think I said when you interviewed me, like, you know, my relationship was absolutely toxic, and it wasn't, you know, one-sided toxicity. You know, it takes two to tango, so to speak, right? And even if it gets toxic, you know, even if one person's creating the toxic behavior, if the other person stays, that's just as toxic. You know, you know what I mean? And so, I think what's interesting too is you're kind of saying it in relation to the relationship, but if you just said it a different way, it's really just stress.
Yeah.
The relationship is, you know, and the tension there is causing the stress, but it's not necessarily the relationship, it's the stress caused by it. You know what I mean? And that stress, again, the dynamic is the cause of the stress, not necessarily, you know, the people.
For sure. Yeah. I don't know. There were so many factors that played into it. But, you know, I'd say the biggest driving force for me to stop drinking was my children. I wanted to be a good example to them. I wanted to be somebody that they could look up to. I wanted to be a person, a man, who I could look at in the mirror and say, if my daughters find somebody like me, I would be happy with that. And I was not.
Yeah.
I was not that I was wildly insecure. I was, you know, I was just a complete dick when I was drunk. And I was drinking. I didn't, part of masculinity to me, because I think American society defines masculinity in a lot of really unhealthy ways. It's how can you fight? How much money do you make? How many women have you slept with? Part of masculinity to me is self-control. If you have control and mastery over yourself, that is masculine. Your emotions, what you consume, how you behave, how you think, like literally having, because we have control over our thoughts. You know, you can control how you choose to perceive things. You can, and it's funny because I'm a very, very passionate person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. Anybody who knows me knows, like, you can look at my face usually and know what I'm thinking about, or like get the theme of what I'm thinking about. And so knowing that I didn't have control over this aspect of myself was massive. I did not want my children to grow up with a father who didn't have control over himself in some way. And I'm not perfect. You know, there are times when I get angry still with my kids or whatever. But God, it's easier now that I'm not drinking. Yeah. And, you know, again, abstinence for a little while. Abstinence does work, you know, and is the answer for some people. I do know people that I'm like, dude, probably shouldn't.
You should stay away forever. Yeah.
But it's, and again, that's part of there's no one size fits all, where 100%. That is the size for some people.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I love the fact that I got to do this podcast. You know, I love the fact that I got to be the host because of the mentality and the outlook of the people that are, you know, pioneering or championing this project. There is no one size fits all. And I wouldn't have done it if the goal had been to push like an abstinence mentality, I wouldn't have done it. But it's just, I truly do believe this is going to be so impactful for so many people, because I really do think a barrier for a lot of people, even pursuing any kind of help, is, well, I don't want like
the all or nothing
stop forever.
The all or nothing,
and so
Forever's a long time.
Yeah, I think that's great. But I genuinely do love helping people. One of my favorite things to do as a leader in the military is try and help people get to where they're going. And sometimes that is, hey, I want to get out of the Army. And I'm like, let's do it. Like, let's figure out how to get you out of the Army the best way possible, set you up for success. And I truly do believe that this project is going to allow all of us involved to help set people up for success, essentially, in something that I have personally struggled with. There was a period of time where I didn't even really talk about the struggles that I had because of that comparison that we talked about earlier. I was like, I never got a DUI. I never crashed my car. I never fought the cops. I never did anything crazy. And so I was like, I can't talk about it. Like, this is silly. I can't talk about this because there's people that have it so much worse than me. And so, I don't know, but I think that my story is, even more common. I think that more common, at least, than I thought it was, where people have a problem and it hasn't gotten to the point where it's catastrophic. But isn't that where we want to meet people anyway? Wouldn't we like to meet people before something catastrophic happens?
Bad. Yeah.
And I do think about the time that I got behind the wheel of a car, or the time that I was watching, there was more than one time when I was watching my kids, and even though they were all asleep, it was the night, nothing happened, something could have happened.
Yeah.
And then I can't drive them to the hospital. Yeah. I looked back and honestly, I don't know what it was, higher power, whatever anybody believes is watching over us or, weaved into the ether. Something was watching out for me in those moments because nothing happened, but something could have. And I often think about that. I think I was lucky because something really bad could have happened. I've always struggled with mental health stuff too. I've always struggled with, I believe, some level of maybe depression, anxiety, stuff like that. Alcohol has never made any of that better.
Yeah.
And so
and let's just say it definitively makes it worse. There's no question.
It objectively makes it worse.
Definitely makes it worse.
And I'm laughing because I think about all the times when I started drinking and then I turned on a playlist of literal sad music and I'm just being all mopey. You know what I mean? You're just being sorry for yourself.
It's like the joke I always say is it's a depressant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a happy thing. You're in a bad mood and you take a depressant. What do you think that leads to?
Right.
It leads to depression. I don't mean clinical, but it's not doing anything good with your brain chemistry in those down moments. Even if it brings it up for a little bit, it's going to crash it later. And so it takes a while, like you say, to keep doing that over and over again before you finally go, you know what, this is not helping.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. There were so many reasons for me. It was just I wish I could point to something definitively August 5th of 2021, this happened, but it was a combination of things with the biggest catalyst or the biggest driving factor being my children and wanting to be that example for them. My then spouse, she recognized that I had an issue and she pushed me to get help. But it just, that plus everything else. And I think I say that because I want to communicate to people too, you don't have to have a catastrophic event before you get help. And I genuinely felt ridiculous calling myself I felt ridiculous because so many people had it so much worse. But that is that toxic comparison that we're talking about.
Yeah, if you really think about it, it's almost a reverse self-worth issue.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's I don't have the right to talk about this because I didn't have it that bad.
Yeah.
And we do the same thing, over and over again. I've actually seen this, and I want your opinion on it, but I actually feel like there's almost this urge for people to self-destruct in order to qualify to have the right to talk about something negative. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we talked about that. When people, they fall off the wagon, to use the old adage.
Yeah.
And then they completely go, because it's you don't have to do that. You went on your binge, but we can get back on track now.
Yeah.
The self-sabotage and self-destructive behavior, And it's funny because in your interview, we talked about how you're like challenge seeking. And I know I'm not a philosopher. I'm not even like I went to a barely real college, to be honest with you, American Military University. Please, American
Well, at least
Military.
you went to any college.
Please, Am, you don't sue me. I do enjoy my degree. But I went to, I don't know. I think that if we don't have a challenge set before us, especially as men, that we will create our own challenge.
I mean, the masculinity conversation is a much deeper, bigger one. But the one thing that I don't think people fully understand is men, I wouldn't say in general, but at least I think men like us, we're fundamentally, to a certain degree, self-destructive by nature.
Yeah.
And if people don't believe that, watch little boys. They do.
They act like they're indestructible.
You give them anything, and it becomes a sword.
Yeah.
Right. You give them anything, it becomes a gun. Like they'll start hitting each other with it. They're like, my buddy said, raising little boys is just like preventing them from dying every day.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And where I'm going with that is, for me, it really took me kind of learning that was somewhat intrinsic in my nature, and that's okay. But I learned the balance of I don't need to be that way all the time. You know what I mean? That might be my inclination sometimes, but at the end of the day, it's really important to have that balance. And for me, like when I met my fiance, that's what balanced me.
Yeah.
That's what was the calm to my chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so important to see that we understand how this all interrelates. With it's easy for us to choose those things that are destructive until we really identify it as such and learn that we have the power to change it.
Yeah. Recognizing that you do have control and recognizing that not everybody has the same reason. Not everybody has kids who is dealing with these issues. But you do have a reason. There is a reason that exists. There's something you can latch on to.
So what was was there something definitively that happened that made you just aware, like, okay, I need to change this?
Yeah. There were a number of things. I never had that just like, I don't know, icicle moment or whatever you want to call it, for me personally, but there were a number of things that I took stock of over time. One of them being, there were times when I was the one with the kids and I would drink. I wanted to drink more. I'd always cut it off, but like I so desperately wanted to be able to just get drunk, just to get,
escape.
Yeah, to escape. But I couldn't, because I had my children and I knew that. And that for sure was one of those like why do I need to be doing this at all?
Yeah.
I'm in a scenario where I guess the draw was just really was the draw that was so concerning. Like, why am I even having to tell myself to hold back?
Yeah.
Like, why is that the thought process?
Why is the only thing stopping me my kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Now that makes sense. I mean, to that, I'll just say this. I don't have kids, and for a long time I didn't really know. I didn't want kids for a long time,
mm-hmm.
and I never really thought of why. And it was only 5 years ago, whatever, or maybe more than 5 years now, that I realized that I didn't want kids because subconsciously I thought I would become my father.
Mm-hmm.
And when I accepted that, oh my God, I wouldn't do that. In fact, I would do the opposite. Then I was open to having kids. It's so weird how kind of on both sides, kids really are such a motivating factor in so many ways. And I didn't want to have children until I kind of addressed and fixed that internally.
Right.
So that makes total sense to me that was such a big motivator for you. Well, it has been so great having you on the Check Your Six Pack podcast today. It's been very fun interviewing the interviewer. But what final thoughts do you have?
Yeah. My final thoughts for sure would be, you don't need to be to the point of catastrophe before you reach out for help. If people close to you are telling you that something is wrong, something probably is wrong. Whatever don't wait until something irreversible happens before you reach out and get help. And it's okay. It's all right. You might be watching this and you might be there right now. It's fine. Lots of us have dealt with this. Lots of us have gone on to live great lives, see success, and just, I don't know, be able to do good in the world. And that's truly what I feel like a lot of us do.
Yeah, especially to what you said about people telling you, especially if you know that those people care about you.
Yeah.
If people that you know care about you are telling you there's a problem, there's a problem. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it, Well, awesome. Well, I'm going to try and wrap this up. So
No. First off, this is my podcast.
All right.
Callie, get out of my seat.
All right. Man, did you make this seat colder?
This is the culminating episode of the Check Your Six Pack podcast, a veteran and military podcast done in conjunction with the Center for the Study of Traumatic Stress and Uniformed Services University. We had a lot of guests, a lot of prolific people in our community. They were vulnerable, they were candid, and they shared stories of both adversity and triumph. They did so directly for your benefit. We really, really hope you enjoyed this, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Grab a seat and lock it up. I'm Dr. Sarah Maggio.
And I'm Kelly Huber. Not here to ruin your weekend plans, just here to explain why your just one more drink brain is terrible at math.
Today, we are going to talk about the scientific basis for different drunk stereotypes, like the happy drunk, or the angry drunk, or the blackout drunk.
And we're not stopping there. We're tying this into blackouts and how your brain gets trained into high-risk drinking, faster than your unit gets tasked for another last-minute detail.
It's a no-brainer that brain structure and activity contributes to different personality types. Get it? No-brainer?
Oh, I got it.
Tough crowd.
Back to the science. Emerging research shows the brain's wiring and activity patterns can help predict which personality steps forward when alcohol is involved.
This does not mean that you can blame your drunk alter ego for the things you did when you were drunk. Drunk you is still you. But understanding the science behind it could help with recognizing when it's time to close out the bar tab.
In another episode, we talk about how higher impulsivity and thrill-seeking personalities are associated with risk for higher levels of alcohol drinking. These characteristics are also common in those who report feeling more energetic while drinking.
To better understand why, let's talk about the biphasic effect of alcohol.
Approaching too nerdy, Doc. You need to hit them with the definition.
Biphasic just means there are two phases. The fun one and the grumpy one.
After just a first few drinks, alcohol has a stimulant effect. You're social, you're energetic, you're ready to party.
This stimulant effect generally occurs when your blood alcohol concentration is rising up to about 0.05. Above this, phase 2 kicks in.
Typically, this is when alcohol has a more sedative effect, primarily through enhanced activity of a brain chemical called GABA and suppressed activity in a brain chemical called glutamate.
GABA and glutamate are functionally opposites. GABA is inhibitory, essentially suppressing the firing of adjacent neurons, while glutamate is excitatory, activates the firing of other neurons.
So when alcohol is on board, there's more GABA and less glutamate. Brain activity can slow down. This is when most people become tired, sluggish, irritable, uncoordinated, and on their way to being passed out in a lawn chair covered in Sharpie art.
Most people feel this high to low shift clearly, but some people experience a stronger dopamine surge and stay in that high energy euphoric state, even when they hit blackout territory.
That's usually because their dopamine circuitry or metabolism plays by a different rule book, genetic variants, enzyme differences, and rate of absorption.
And those who are more sensitive to the stimulant effects are often less sensitive to the sedative effects of alcohol, making them less aware of impairments and leading to faster and more drinking.
Essentially, their internal stop drinking alarm is unplugged. No warning lights, no brake pedal, just autopilot towards blackouts and bad decisions.
Which brings us to our next topic, blackouts. Among people who drink alcohol, about half report having at least one blackout in their lifetime.
Even though it may be common, it is a dangerous space to be in. Blackouts are not the same as passing out, which is when someone loses consciousness.
For the record, these are different things, but they're both dangerous.
During a blackout, the lights are on, the party is raging, but the brain is basically filing all memories straight to the shredder.
And alcohol has its dirty little hands in virtually all parts of the memory process, but it especially interferes with memory encoding.
Memory encoding is the process where the brain takes fresh intel from short-term memory and moves it to long-term storage for safekeeping.
The primary brain region involved in this process is called the hippocampus, a region in the medial temporal lobe that's shaped like a seahorse. It's also critical for forming new episodic memories. What happened, when, and where.
From a neuroscience standpoint, during a blackout, rather than forgetting, the brain fails to record experiences, while the rest of you is still out there operating without supervision.
Under normal conditions, forming new long-term memories of experiences is facilitated through a process called long-term potentiation, or LTP for short.
LTP is the cellular process in the brain that strengthens the communication channels between neurons.
A neuron is a specialized cell in the nervous system whose job it is to receive information, process it, and send signals to other cells. Essentially, the neurons are the core comms unit of the brain.
Alcohol takes this system offline by disrupting the GABA and glutamate circuits in the hippocampus, rendering it completely non-deployable.
Like Austin.
Sick burn.
And during a blackout, while the hippocampus is active enough for someone to be walking, talking, texting, and making terrible life choices, it's not functional enough to store what's happening.
These aren't gaps in retrieval. The memory was never formed. There's nothing to retrieve. The hippocampus didn't preserve the data. This is how people wake up to mysterious bruises or mysterious phone numbers saved as Chaplin with a beer emoji.
Or mysterious Venmo payments labeled live rabbit for Barrick's pet. Or mysterious official-looking envelopes with NJP on it. But no matter what memory mysteries accompany the hangover, the neuropharmacology remains relatively the same.
And even though science can't explain how you got back to the barracks that one night, it can explain what alcohol did to your brain along the way.
You didn't teleport. Your hippocampus just didn't record the movement phase. From a physiological standpoint, blackouts are more strongly associated with how fast the BAC rises rather than the exact number of drinks.
This is why front-loading shots or pounding drinks on an empty stomach is the perfect setup for a blackout. Once tolerance starts building, blackouts become more common.
As people build behavioral and pharmacodynamic tolerance, their motor function and speech may look less drunk at a given BAC, but the hippocampus does not necessarily build tolerance at the same rate.
So high tolerance can make someone appear relatively functional, but their hippocampus is already passed out on the lawn.
And frequent blackouts aren't just wild stories. Repeated exposure to high doses of alcohol that disrupt memory function can lead to persistent changes in memory, mood, and cognitive control.
Blackouts, stimulant sensitivity, tolerance, none of these things happen in a vacuum. They're the predictable outcomes of what alcohol does to neural circuits, neurotransmitters, and memory systems.
Understanding your own neurobiological profile is part of informed decision making and long-term health. Understand your risk factors. Make decisions based on physiology, not momentum.
And for the love of your future career, your liver, and your next promotion board, eat something before you start drinking.
Got firearms at home? Do you know people who do? 75 Americans die from firearm suicide every day, and that's depressing. But there's something we can do about it. Storing firearms securely at home can put time and space between an impulsive thought and a fatal act. Talking about firearms with people we care about can be difficult. I'm Kurt West, host of Let's Talk About Your Guns, a podcast where we talk about having those difficult conversations. It's about having open and honest communication and motivating people in our lives to store firearms more safely at home. Through stories and interviews, we offer practical, non-judgmental ways to talk about gun safety in tough situations. This podcast is not about being for or against guns. It's about saving lives. Let's Talk About Your Guns is available now on all major podcast platforms. We hope you'll give us a listen.